I'd like to give you a little short recap of the Torah narrative of the last few weeks. So, the Israelites were forced to leave their homeland. It was a matter of survival because there was a famine in the land of Israel. So we ended up in the diaspora, and they were good to us for a while. The Egyptians fed us, and we became quite comfortable. We even had Jews in the highest levels of government, second in command to Pharaoh. But then a new leader arose, and he fomented an anti-Semitic fervor among his people like nothing else, referring to us kind of like vermin, multiplying like cockroaches. He made it clear that we were never really one of them. We were a different nation. In fact, the first time we are called Am B'nai Yisrael, the nation of Israel, is by Pharaoh in the book of Exodus. He wasn't just recognizing the Israelites as a people for the first time, but a different people who would never become real Egyptians, no matter how long we lived there. Doesn't this story sound eerily familiar? Not only because we retell it every year at Passover, but because we've heard it over and over again in Jewish history, from 15th century Spain to 1930s Germany to 1970s Iran. Some people even think we're living some of this in America today. Now, I don't think that's true, but I'm certainly keeping a close watch. So, when nations who once embraced Jews suddenly turn on us, what does our people do? Well, in our Exodus narrative, we realized our people needed to return home to the land of our patriarchs and matriarchs. We couldn't rely on foreign leaders just to be good to us. We needed our own nationalist movement. We embraced being Am B'nai Yisrael, seeing ourselves as a nation for the first time. And so, Moses led our people's first return home to Zion. He created the spiritual architecture for our nation, replete with all the laws of our society, even as he never made it to the promised land himself. Now fast forward, about 3,600 years, and Theodor Herzl articulated this same nationalist longing with a new movement called Zionism. Compelled by the repeated historical experience of the Jews, and he created the spiritual architecture for our modern nation state, even as he never got to live in the promised land himself either. Herzl was born in 1860 in Budapest. As a child, his house was very close to the Dohani synagogue, which is the synagogue after which Central Synagogue was modeled. Herzl was an assimilated, educated, worldly Jew who attended the grand, beautiful synagogue in the center of the city, much like you and me. Herzl became a journalist, and he covered the Dreyfus Affair, in which a Jewish French army captain was falsely convicted of spying for Germany. He could not believe the explicit anti-Semitism he saw. France was the very first country to emancipate Jews in 1790. And yet, 100 years later, Herzl realizes Jews are still seen as the other, even at the epicenter of emancipation. He grew to believe that anti-Semitism could not be defeated or cured. We needed our own nation. He wrote, "The Jews who wish for a state will have it. We shall live at last, free, on our own soil, and die peacefully in our own homes. The world will be freed by our liberty. And whatever we attempt there to accomplish for our own welfare will react powerfully and beneficially for the good of all humanity." It's a beautiful vision of Zionism, and in many ways, much of the Zionist dream has come true. And there are, of course, ways in which we still fall short of that dream. However, there are people today who want to make Zionism a dirty word, to equate it with racism or white colonialism or apartheid. Don't let them corrupt what Zionism truly stands for, which is the movement for Jewish self-determination, an expression of the Jewish people's dreams of liberation and empowerment after millennia of struggle for civil rights and equality in the face of persecution, exile, and genocide. I'll credit Zionists for this definition of Zionism. Now, if you believe in the right of Jewish self-determination, then you are a Zionist. Full stop. You don't have to agree with the policies, all of the policies of the Israeli government, to be a Zionist. You don't have to pass a history or a geography test in order to be a Zionist. When was the Balfour Declaration? Where are the boundaries of the Green Line? People often use these as a litmus test for even being able to talk about Israel, but it's not that complicated. If you believe in Jewish self-determination, you should call yourself a Zionist. More than ever, we need Zionists to assert themselves proudly and to show up in spaces fighting for the values we care about, most especially regarding Israel. So even when I get frustrated or upset with some of the policies or actions of the Israeli government, and I haven't been shy about sharing some of them, being a Zionist means staying engaged and doing everything I can. It can be hard at times because there's not a whole lot that I can do. But I want to tell you that every Jew in the world has a way to influence Israel in the next 3 months in a very tangible and important way. So Herzl founded the World Zionist Congress in 1897 in Basel, Switzerland. He envisioned it as the parliament of the Jewish people. The Congress is still operating today on behalf of global Jewry for the good of the Zionist dream 123 years later. It's an incredible premise. Even though you and I don't live in the state of Israel, we each get to vote for a representative in the Zionist Congress, which is convened every 5 years. We each get a say in what happens in the Jewish state. And what's at stake? Well, over $5 billion have been allocated through the Congress. And the leaders of the Congress get to vote on the leadership of very important organizations such as the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, and the Jewish Agency. And if you vote for reform seats, that translates into funding to support the reform movement in Israel, to help build a civil society, and to promote equality for all Israeli citizens. That's the platform of the reform movement. Now, there are 500 seats in the Congress, and about 145 of them are allocated for American Jewish seats. And I'm honored this year to be number 10 on the reform slate. So if you vote for reform, you can help put me into the World Zionist Congress so I can be your voice there. Now, 5 years ago, even though every single adult Jew in the world is entitled to vote, guess how many did? 1%. In Manhattan, there were only 1,000 votes from all the Jews in Manhattan. That is pathetic. Now, if everyone in this sanctuary seated here tonight and a handful more of you live streaming voted, we could beat that number just from Central Synagogue alone tonight. And we should. Now, I will tell you that the Orthodox community took 26% of the delegates 5 years ago. They were punching way above their weight of only 10% of the population because, you know, in those communities, if their rabbi tells them to vote, they do it. So I don't use my rabbinic authority that often, but I'm going to tell you, go and vote. And this also goes for you live streamers out there. You can also vote, and information will be on your screen after my sermon. Now, if I can't convince you to vote on a personal basis, so that because I'm on the slate, then let me urge you to vote so that you can help fund religious pluralism and equality in Israel. And if that's not enough, let me urge you to vote so that you can be counted as a Zionist. Let Israelis and the world know at this crucial time in Jewish history that the right for Jewish self-determination matters to you. Don't give up on the national aspirations of our people to create a country that is both a haven and a homeland for all Jews that will benefit all humanity. Just as Moses dreamed of the promised land over 4,000 years ago with Am B'nai Yisrael, we too will be the nation of Israel and have a voice in the Jewish people's greatest sovereign project of all time. Now get out there and vote.